Yeah, great, excellent. So welcome back to Konsoll 21. I hope you've had a really great morning with some really funny talks, as well as Stephen's. And yes, so if you don't know me already, my name is Dr. Satoshi Horak. I'm a games animation lecturer from Teesside, and also a lecturer in games business and marketing. So I'm really excited to bring together a really interesting and diverse range of people from across publishing, investment and marketing to share their knowledge and insight. So if it's okay, would it be okay if we go around the panel and just introduce ourselves and where we're from?
Sure thing. My name's Cassia Curran. I run my own agency, strategic consultant agency called Curran Games Agency, through which I advise various games funds. I also help indie game studios with strategic analysis, and I also am an angel investor in games industry.
My name is Thronström. I work for Amplifier Game Invest, which is an Embracer company. We do equity investments and work very, very close to the studios that we invest in. So today we have 16 studios within the group. And every day for me is I'm an executive producer, so I work very, very close to a few of the studios that we work with to support them, making sure that they have everything that they need to create their dream game to do that, and then help them to take that to market.
Hey, my name is Harri Manninen. I'm the founding partner of Play Ventures. We are a gaming-focused venture fund that invests globally into early-stage gaming companies, mainly pre-seed and seed rounds, investing mostly into equity, so investing directly in companies, not projects. I'm based out of Helsinki, Finland. I've been in the game industry since the early 2000s. I used to be a founder, so I built 3 companies in Helsinki, and now I've moved over to the dark side of VC investing. To date, we have invested into 40 companies around the world. I'm super happy to be here. It's my first time in Bergen.
Cool. And I'm Stephen Hay. You may know me from a very unfunny talk I delivered this morning. And so I'm a marketing consultant, but one of the jobs that I do is actually scout for a indie games publisher called Merge Games. So they're a medium-sized publisher, I guess. We're about 20 people, and we publish indie games across digital and retail, boxed and special editions.
Great. So actually, as a show of hands, who here is running a company or thinking of running a game startup at some point? Wow, that's awesome. Nice. So great. So I guess the point of this panel ultimately is about raising finance in one or different ways. And so hopefully, you all represent different aspects of that. So, how would you describe the different roles of, say, the different types of publishers that are available? Well, publisher and investor as well.
Yeah, there's a whole range. There's a huge number of different types of publisher and different investors. So on the, I think I'll just info dump on the audience, and you guys can jump in.
Do it.
Or maybe from your experience as well.
I mean, publisher-wise, there's about 200 publishers. Some of them focus on PC and console games, premium titles. Some of them focus on mobile. Some of them that's like hyper-casual, or so forth. The publishers, they run the gamut from tiny indie game publishers that only provide services in return for share of revenues and don't provide any kind of funding, right up to massive, huge publishers that can offer very significant amounts of funding, as well as lots of different types of services, like your QA, localization, huge marketing, all that kind of thing. And then I would say the next sort of range is project finance funds. So those don't offer services, they just offer pure financing, and in return take a share of the revenues of your games. And then you have equity investors. An example is Play Ventures. They will take a percentage of your company. So they're looking for more the long-term, multiple games. And there's lots of different types of equity investors. I'm pretty familiar with lots of different VCs, and they've all got their own specific kind of strategy and kind of companies that they're looking for. They've all got their own sort of investment thesis. And so, yeah, I would say that's the kind of range of, say, private investment.
Yeah.
I would also say that.
Oh, and yes, Amplify is kind of special as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The special. While the publishers and the project investors, of course, is they're solely focused on your current project and your current game. And they usually do have a lot of services that's helping you out with like localization, QA, marketing, and a lot of other stuff as well, like helping you through submission on the consoles. So they have more services, I would say, but they're focused on your project, not so much about your company, because that's yours. And from the investor side that we represent, like we're investing in you, the team, the people, to create a long-term partnership where we can help you, coaching, mentoring you, and help you with everything around just, beyond just game development. If you want to grow your company, or if you want to hit new markets and something, we always set up like a long-term plan with all the studios. So we work in a little bit different ways. But, and we didn't actually say that yesterday when we were talking, that these are quite often combined. So you can have an investor that is either a majority or minority investor in your studio, but on the game that you're working, we have no problem, like most investors have no problem then partnering up with a publisher to work with you on your specific game. So they're not like mutually exclusive,
Yeah,
like they are quite common finding them.
Yeah, I would say to everybody who's either building their own studio here or thinking about it, I think this is probably the best time in the history of the game industry to start your own company, just from a perspective that there's a lot of capital available. So we founded Play Ventures, I think we were among the 3 VCs who only invested in gaming back in 2018, 3 or 4. And now I think there's about 30 VCs globally that only invest in gaming. So, capital is becoming less of an issue. Obviously, it's not easy to raise money, but there's a lot of alternatives out there. Whether you want to, go the VC funding route or work with guys like Amplifier for sort of a combination of equity investment and potentially maybe publishing down the line, or work with publishers. One group that we didn't mention yet was the angel investors. So angel investors, like Cassia, are often people who invest their own capital into very early stage studios, and also help with their time and their network. And for us, I mean, we invest extremely early as well into game studios and back teams very early, but we're very comfortable in co-investing alongside angels, for example.
And I think the important thing is here for you in the audience too, talk amongst yourself for the founders, or if you're going to start your studio, to see like, what kind of support do we want? And because there's so many publishers out there, so many different investors out there, so it's very important that you kind of identify what you need help with and who would be a best partner. Because when we meet studios, we always say that it's equally important that you guys do due diligence on us as we do on you. Because it doesn't matter if it's publisher or an investor, we're working very close to each other, and we're going to do that for your project or your company.
So that was a really great answer, and it all sounds very nice and amicable. But it was great to see so many of you are interested in potentially entrepreneurship and startup. But as a show of hands, who here would say they trust publishers? And who here says they would be cautious or don't trust them, maybe? Okay, so maybe they've had a bit of a bad rap in the past before. So, Stephen, I know you've had like a long storied history and lots of different, played lots of different roles. Why do you think that there is that perception, and what do you think developers publishers can do to maybe create more amicable or fair contracts? Or what do developers need to be wary of, or at least sensible when thinking about that relationship with publishers?
Yeah, I mean, it's really, I think that distrust probably comes from there have been bad practices, I think, in the past, and there probably still are, but I think there's far fewer people doing it now who have these kind of bad business practices or quite selfish business practices kind of going. I think now there's a transparency, so people can see, and the games industry and developers will talk to each other. So you can't just get away with that anymore. Well, I would hope that's the case, because it will get discussed, it will get kind of highlighted. So I think in terms of creating a good relationship, it's about, I think all the work has to go in at the very beginning, is getting that kind of contract right, making sure you're meeting the people that you're going to be working with, not just the biz dev people or the MD of the company or whatever, but the actual producers and the marketing people and that team. And you need to meet them, you need to be convinced by them as well before you sign anything, And I think it's up to, when I go into pitch meetings, I feel an equal responsibility to pitch Merge as much as you're pitching the game, essentially. So it's, I think, just kind of being fair, being transparent, being open, having a contract that you can understand or interrogate, and it's very easy, and I can see why developers go, oh, great, we've got a contract, get it signed, and they start immediately. People want to get these contracts signed, of course you do, because you want to get working on the game. But that's the period when you should really be most cautious, that you should really look into the contract and ask all of the questions, if you physically can, even if it means just a European flight or whatever, get on a plane and go and visit them. Or, they should be coming to you, really. Because you'll be working very closely with these people for a long time, for, 2 years, 3 years maybe. So you need to know them inside out. So I get it. I get why people could mistrust publishers. However, I think the right publishers and the right game, and that partnership should be an equal partnership.
So do we only really ever hear when things go bad in the press, of bad deals or fallouts and things like that?
Sorry, what was the question?
Do you think we only tend to hear about the bad situation?
Well, I mean, the other thing in that relationship, a developer goes, here's my game, and then the game, if a game fails, well, then it's very easy to kind of go, well, maybe, the marketing was bad, and really there's kind of a lot of reasons why good games fail. I mean, I think at the moment, the market is so saturated with really high-quality product coming out onto certainly Steam every week, and just not doing anything. Games that really deserve to perform, not going anywhere. But the story that is easier to write as well, or to blog about or whatever, about a bad publisher is an easier story than a bad game. And it's not that games are bad, it's not that publishers are bad generally, it's generally a complex, an array of issues that mean that games don't work sometimes.
I have some practical advice for indies that are worried about publishers. And if you're lucky enough to get multiple offers from a publisher, and you don't know how to choose, do due diligence on the publishers. So that means go talk to the developers that the publishers have worked with before. You can actually ask the publishers, can you give me an introduction to the developers that you've worked with before? And then you talk to those developers, but then you especially go to talk to developers that the publishers didn't introduce you to and ask how that went. So that's my number one advice when it comes to, publishers. I would say, yes, Stephen, you're completely right. You're dating the biz dev person, you're marrying the producer, so you'll need to actually get to know the people who you'll be working on a day-to-day basis, because once the contract's signed, the biz dev person's going to slope off and find other games, and you'll never see them again. You also can't do good business with bad people, I'd say. I think that if they're a publisher, the people at the publisher have a track record of screwing over the developers that they've worked with, be really wary. So even if you've only got one offer and it's with a dodgy publisher and you've got no other options, I would say no if it turns out to be a dodgy publisher. There are actually there's some really good publishers, fantastic publishers out there, and there's some really dodgy publishers out there, and there's all the ones in between. There's lots of new publishers who may or may not be good, all this sort of thing. But my number one, my next piece of advice when it comes to contracts is just get a lawyer. It's cheap. They're cheaper than you might expect. Find a lawyer that is experienced in with publishing deals in the games industry. So that means go asking your indie studio friends, like who have they worked with in the past that have found good. Like, your referrals are like the best I think for lawyers. And there's often lots and lots of different lawyers around. In the UK, there's dozens.
Yeah. So I mean, yesterday we had a great talk from Tim from Sheridan's, a law firm in the UK. So he's made his slides available. He touched upon a lot of the common publishing contract things to be aware of. So feel free to have a look at that. And we also talked about Raw Fury, one of the other publishers who decided to share their publishing contract and make it open to public scrutiny. Whether that backfires or not, I don't know. But yeah, they're all great resources to check out. And in terms of public perception, Dan and Harry, maybe a lot of people have seen things like Dragon's Den and Shark Tank, and when they watch these pieces of pop culture, they may start to wonder, well, why I've created this game studio from the ground up, why should I ever give away part, never mind all, of my company to investors?
I think it's about a lot of smaller studios want to stay very small, and they want to keep it very contained. And if you want to do that, do that. I think that's very important. Like, there's nothing right or wrong here. But many studios that we meet, they have come to a junction in their path where they realize that we do not have all the skills in-house. If it is like marketing or localization or mentoring or the experience or all the networks and contacts that, with first party or Sony or Microsoft, like that. And they want to grow their company from maybe a studio of 3 people up to maybe 15 or 20 people, like over the few years. And that costs money to do that. And just hoping for that super mega hit, that you can hope for that, or you can do a partnership with an investor that wants to, that shares your vision and shares your dreams and how to get there, like, year by year, and that can have your back and support you over time. And there's many different investors as well, like how you do it. Like, you have from, I guess, one really spectrum, like they only offer your money and no help at all, that what I would call be stupid money. And then you have smart money on the other side, or on this other side, where I would say we're quite alike there, that we worked in the industry for a long, long time, and we have both run businesses, or we have worked in game studios, or we've been on the floor, so we know game development really well as well. And so there's a lot of experience and knowledge that we have, and a lot of pitfalls that we've done, and we can support and help you to avoid those biggest traps as well. So it's a good support system, and many studios that we work with, what they feel is the best thing, except for like making sure that they have funding and they can have like a little bit of a calmer development environment, is that they don't have to be the ones taking every single decision themselves, both business-wise or in the game. They have someone that they can talk to and have that collaboration, because it's tough running your own studio.
Yeah, and I would add to that just one thing is, you have to know what you're getting into if you raise money from VCs like us, for example, because we're a venture investor. That path is a path of very aggressive growth usually, both in terms of like your studio and your business, and it's not for everybody. And I think you as founders need to sort of do I would say even more with VCs, you need to do your due diligence whether or not it's the right partner for you, because it's gonna likely last longer than most marriages do. So So yeah, but you know, if you want to go the VC route, then you're getting into a path where, you know, us as investors want you to have that ambition to build, you know, the best company in the world in whatever category you decide to pursue.
And as we were talking, you know, I think Cassie, you were talking about how working with an investor or publisher can be like, you know, going from dating to being married. Some people, you know, talk about relationship almost like family. So it's clear that there is a kind of either a short-term publishing relationship on single projects or a longer-term investment. And when there are that kind of level of involvement as stakeholders together, you know, with a lot of the issues that the industry has been grappling with like sexual harassment and toxic workplaces, do you think that investors or publishers have any, I don't know, an expectation of duty of care for either the people they're dealing with at a senior level, like creative technical directors, or maybe the people that they work under?
Yeah, there's of course should be a duty of care. I think that the investors just generally should be looking after the company's investment. That includes making sure that they have really good corporate governance processes, and that includes like making sure that they have anti-sexual harassment policies, all this sort of thing. So I think that should be pretty much standard. Yeah.
I think that this might be one of those differences between the publishers and investors. Since we're there all the time working with you, we wanted to try to help you in all of these things to make sure that, see if you do have these programs in effect, or if you don't, like how can we help you introduce them? How can you make sure that you have a safe working environment and all the corporate governance and all of that? So I think that might be one different, that we're working with you to build something bigger, and sometimes it's really hard to you know, to ask the question if you don't know that the question is there. So sometimes it's, you know, if you're quite a new studio, that oh, we were supposed to have X, Y, and Z as well, and we didn't know about that, and that's also where we can help to, you know, support you in building that long term. But it's super important for us when we work with all our studios to make sure that, you know, it is a safe environment and it's a welcoming and, you know.
I think of one issue that there is currently no mechanism to deal with is, what do you do as a female founder looking for financing from a publisher or investor and you're sexually harassed by that publisher or investor? There is no mechanism that I really know of, especially when it's like international or when it's like taking place over Zoom or something like that. I've worked with studios or spoken to studios where like the founder was asked out on a date via the meet to match system at the conference. Or having really gross sexual comments over Zoom meeting, like as a prospective investor meeting. It's outrageous, it happens. And it can be really demoralizing for female founders in particular, obviously. I don't really know a huge amount about what can be done about it, but except for, you know, sort of creating an internal list of investors and publishers to steer clear of. But it's definitely a sort of systemic problem, and it's partly because, as you can see, there's like approximately 88% of investors in the game space are male or identify as male. So it's just like it's a deep-rooted systemic problem that's really hard to fix, but it just requires a lot of great allies and a lot of unfortunately work by people affected as well. So
I would say that Amplifier, since we're part of a bigger group under the Embracer umbrella, so there's multiple legs of different companies and sections, and then Amplifier is one of them, and we have our studios, like our family in our branch. And as part of the Embracer work with this, we do have these reporting functions all the way up, so they can actually like first surpass me if there's something that they're not happy with me, if I've done something to my boss. But even if it's like for our CEO, there's also a system to go all the way up to Embracer and kind of like surpass everything to go straight to the top.
That's good.
Which I think is really, really good. And that's not only for like harassment, but also for a lot of, corruption clauses and a lot of it, since we're also on the stock market. So we need to have those, but I think that we already had those for a long time to try to at least make sure that there is that channel to go one step higher than.
To be honest, if the publisher investor sort of thinks in that way towards women, the women will not get funding from them anyway. They're just wasting their time. So at least you know that if you are offered something, offered an investment or publishing deal, then almost by definition they're believers in you, etc. So.
And Cassie, you're involved in a program. Is it Angel Wings?
So it's Wings. So
Wings,
yes,
right.
one of the funds I advise is a fund that invests in games made by women and marginalized genders. And the key difference with this is that the selection committee is made up entirely of women, successful female game developers. And so I guess like a major selling point for Wings, if you're a female founder, is that you certainly won't be sexually harassed by anyone from Wings.
It's a low bar.
It's a promise.
Right, okay, that's good. So, I mean, it seems like Norway, it's a beautiful country, and, in some ways it feels very homogenous, so, it is what it is, but at least globally there's a very diverse audience, and it's interesting that you identified that this is a systemic problem, and the example that we gave.
Absolutely. I mean, just like a really unfortunate example is that if you look at the most popular streamers on Twitch, they're about, I think, 49 out of the top 50 presenters male. So it is really like endemic at all levels. Players, it's not necessarily conscious misogyny, but it can be very much unconscious bias, and just these sort of you associate video games with masculinity, so therefore that's you unconsciously reproduce it. It's like that's a very common dynamic, and that just has that requires active interruption.
Yeah, I mean, so I saw a lot of the great game pitches yesterday, and they were awesome, and I'm sure we invest in a lot of great games, and I'm kind of curious of if we did have things in place to diversify publishing, would we have different demographics that were being met, different types of games being met? How about you guys? Do you think that the games we produce are diverse enough or interesting enough, or do you think we're missing out on having different people finding these games and investing in these games?
If I go first from our perspective, like the majority of the studios we've invested in have been mobile free-to-play studios, and especially in the casual side, the majority of those players are actually female players. Many times they are also older players. They are not the audience that we're seeing right now here at this hall. So I think you have to remember that there is a very diverse audience of players, and not necessarily all of them identify themselves as gamers. But gaming as a form of entertainment is the biggest in the world currently, and has such a wide variety of different audiences and categories and subcategories that I hope it also reflects on the people who make it and also investors. I mean, we're lucky in Play that we have one of our vice presidents, Felicia, has been with us since the beginning, and it does matter to have her on the team, because it also, I think it lowers the bar for female founders to approach us.
Yes, it makes sense.
And instead of walking into not a room these days, but a Zoom meeting with just white males, looking very, very judgmentally, because we're investors. We're very nice people. But having Felicia there, for example, I think it brings comfort. And I think it's important when you're in a situation where you're raising money and you're trying to be as loose and as confident as possible as a founder. But I do think one thing I would say is that I think the gaming industry has taken steps in the right direction, by surfacing all these problems. I think just if you look at founding teams from like the mid-2000s, I don't think you ever saw, I think like, women talent was very few and far between, and I think nowadays, at least what we talk to a lot of our teams is like hire diverse early, because the later you do that, the more difficult it's going to be.
Yeah.
And if you don't hire, like if you don't have a female co-founder or a female founder, and you bring in, that female talent early, they will attract more of that talent, which I think, all the teams need, because, you don't want to be in a situation in the industry where you're losing half of the available talent, amazingly creative and skillful people, just because of demographics in your studio.
I agree. Like, I'm super happy that some of our studios are like 50-50, which I think is amazing. I think we do have 3 studios that was founded by women, and out of those 3, 2 of those studios, they are CEO levels, which I think it's awesome. And we're constantly doing the same thing as you said, like be diverse with everything what diversity means, and start early. So I think that they also set high standards in these new modern game studios. So they want to be diverse. So, and we see that in their hiring process as well, like how they go through it. So, but it's super important. Absolutely.
Yeah.
From a publisher point of view, when I'm scouting for games, I mean, the games are always first, really. So it's not like you can kind of filter by kind of, the gender makeup of the developer. It's the games that come first. What we have been seeing, especially in the past kind of couple of years with the pandemic and the rise of digital shows, is that, we can see and get pitched games by teams in India, by teams in Latin America, by teams because they, the travel costs are no longer kind of there to them. It's not a barrier. So we're seeing more diversity geographically because of that. And we are seeing new titles because of that, and new kind of cultural themes that we hadn't seen before kind of emerging, which is really nice. So I think that is something that we're very active in, and very active in kind of spreading which of these digital shows we go to. And then the other thing that we do, which is kind of a local thing, which is more about recruitment within the company, is to work on programs like the Prince's Trust locally, which is a UK program which brings like long-term unemployed youth back into work, and these young people have got jobs at Sony. We're looking at taking somebody on as well, and a couple of juniors into Merge, and then encourage that as well within the teams that we are working with, especially at the beginning now. It's much more of a part of our due diligence to look at the team makeup and talk to them about how they hire and where they find talent.
But if anyone wants to learn more, I think that the most important thing to do is to stay for one of the talks this afternoon by Chella Ramanan. She's going to be delving into that in great detail. So, yeah.
Awesome. So, yes, Chella and I are both part of an organisation called POC in Play, so we have some interest in diversifying the industry. And we talked about how global the industry, and a lot of people probably already know that Asia and China are one of the biggest markets, particularly for mobile gaming. I know, Cassia, you've done a lot of work in China and Asia, so presumably some of you may be interested in appealing to that market, but also there have been things that have happened recently in terms of security concerns of acquisition, Western acquisitions. There has been censorship over maybe liberal Western kind of LGBT content, as well as restrictions on playtime. So do you think that Western developers should be still trying to appeal to Chinese audiences, or is there greater consideration that they need to do to both in terms of design and publishing and investment?
I think this is a massive topic. Like, where do I start? The Chinese audience is really hungry for games, and typically, for example, if you're a PC console developer, often I've heard lots of stories from indie developers where they've localized their games into simplified Chinese and seen very quickly that between 8 to 20% of their sales are in that language. There is a lot of regulatory issues. It's a huge, horrendous process. I have ushered indie game developers through this process when I was working in China, and it's so long and really tough to do. And now there's a really fixed quota. So you're actually there's no need to even worry because you're almost certainly never going to be offered a Chinese publishing deal. So, and if Chinese players want to play your game, then they will find it. And to be honest, Chinese players, they're not necessarily interested in games that are sort of targeted to them. If it's coming from a Western studio, they're actually kind of interested in the whole Westernness. You know, it's kind of exotic, right? Or like understanding different cultures. Or so you don't need to worry about that. I think that if you did get offered a publishing contract, then if they offer you a lot of money up front, then you may want to consider taking it. But otherwise, if it's just like a revenue share or something like that, I'd probably say no. Would be my sort of straightforward advice. I think it is. It makes me so sad that there is. It's been very hard for the last couple of years in terms of rising anti-China kind of racism. Certainly, I've had a rising experience of racism against me as being half Chinese, and I think that it'd be great to see more Western players playing Chinese games and being open and understanding of this massive, complicated nation, which you cannot boil down into like a simple description. It's just too diverse. I think that Western gamers should play Chinese games and Chinese gamers should play Western games, and I think that's all I can really say at the subject now.
I think it's difficult enough for a studio to make a game, especially for like newly found studios, and then for the first game specifically targeting an Asian or a Chinese market where there's so many, pitfalls just getting into that region, like with your game, like that's going to be one other, hill that you need to climb to do that. And I think that there's plenty of like agencies that you can contact to kind of help you to at least see would it be possible to do it, and how much would it cost? Because remember, this is a business. Like you are also in the business. You want to earn money so you can make the next game. So you don't make one game and then you never work in the gaming industry again because you're so angry. So it's all about. It's also a business decision. Like if you're a smaller team, should you put that much focus on one very specific market? Because we don't usually do that. Like very specific American or very specific European or Spain. So I think that that's something that you could absolutely take on board and then see we would like to do it, maybe for our next game, or at least to give you a little bit more time to do your research.
It's interesting. This is one of the areas in gaming or one of the geos in China where actually, like for a Western developer, like mobile has a much harder time than PC, mainly because you can do you can just do simplified Chinese translations of your Steam game, and then the players will find it. It's almost impossible to get your mobile games published in China. You have to have a local partner, and the way the regulation now works, I think it takes up to 2 years of getting that, the license to actually distribute the game. So, from our perspective, like all of the studios we work with, they don't even basically take China into account, which is sad. Like Cassia said. Not only from a business perspective, because Chinese mobile gamers like a third of the market in terms of spending, that's a massive gap, right? But also from a cultural perspective, that it would be great if they were able to play more Western games. But on the other hand, I think on the mobile side, there's a lot of new great Chinese mobile games that have come out in the West. Starting from Genshin Impact to the games that Lilith does, AFK Arena. Rise of Kingdoms. So there's some incredible gaming talent in China, and they're coming for the Western markets.
They have to at this point because it's so difficult now in China to even for domestic developers.
Exactly. Yeah.
So what do you do if you actually want to expand and grow your business in a games business in China? Well, it's going to be easier for you to export your game or expand internationally than trying to expand your reach in the domestic market. So.
Awesome. So I'm aware that I'm sure lots of you probably maybe this is an area of games development that you're not as familiar with, and you maybe have some burning questions. So if anyone does have any questions, we do have a bit of time. Is anyone feeling brave? Bonus points if you want to harass us about NFTs or metaverse or blockchain.
Ask Dan about the metaverse.
Yeah.
Yes.
Please.
There's a 2-hour workshop after this.
Does anyone have a game that they want to develop or pitch, and they've got some query about investment or publishing? Yeah, I think there's a mic there if you want to. No, you don't.
Oh my
ask.
gosh.
Okay.
Norwegian people are so shy. Go for it.
Here you go.
Okay, we have.
Well, I mean, so
a bridge.
Oh,
so
great.
Yeah, fantastic.
The mic is so high up.
Just unfair.
I'll take debate. What is your opinion on NFTs and those kind of...
Who wants to start?
Who wants to start? Like, no one wants to start.
I want to start.
I think we have to there's a personal opinion maybe, and also for the company. We are trying to understand it. I think it's something that will mature, but even if we have more than 100 years of experience within the gaming industry, both in marketing, biz dev, production, we're trying to understand what it's really trying to solve. Because I think there is talking to the people that really burn for it, like they champion it. It's part of a vision of creating something greater and decentralized, which might be really nice. But there also needs to be a practical application of how are we actually going to work with it. I think that for me, when I see someone paints a picture in Photoshop and and $30 million later, I'm like, I don't understand this. I really feel like a boomer in that case. I don't understand. And someone takes a picture of it and says I also have it, and they go hey, you can't have my picture, and then it's it's the internet. This is how images work. But I think with NFTs in game, it might be a little bit different. Maybe I'm wrong, but I would say Steam is 95% there. If they would allow me to sell my cards and actually the money ends up in my wallet and I can actually take that money out of their financial system, I think that a lot of the checkboxes of what would the NFT be is kind of checked. But I don't own that, the specific unique weapon or something. But I think the challenge is there that everyone that I've spoken to that wants to get into this in gaming, they all want to have their own currency, and they all want to have their own NFTs, but at the same time, they want everyone else to be able to, share this marketplace. So if I create a sword in my game, and that's an NFT, and then it would be great if that sword can be used somewhere else in someone else's game, but then that means that the developer on that side needs to support that. And what do they get for that? What is their market cut? So it's quite a complex, big thing. And we're not really against it, but we're trying to understand it. And it doesn't really help that these very first things that happens now is all the scams, because that would scare away the people who are in this business long term, which will lower the possibilities for serious studios that want to do a proper implementation of it. It would make it harder for them to actually get the financing or funding for it, because as investors, we're going to go, let's see when this calms down a little bit to see what's...
Depends on the investor, though.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, no, actually, I would say for us, we're saying we're going to hang back a little bit so that we can understand it better.
Yeah, so just from our standpoint, I think we're very curious about it. Just the amount of, so what we call in the VC industry as deal flow, so new pitches that are coming our way and founders reaching out. There's an increasing amount of, I would say, talented game makers very curious about, let's call it play to earn or play and earn, where there's an earning component and there's a component of you as a player actually owning your digital assets and items within that game, and then having financial value attached to that. I'm, like Dan said, I'm less of a believer in sort of the interoperability between games for certain items. But I'm curious on the fact, we had this discussion last night, that what if, down the line, you're playing an NFT game or a crypto game, and you've grinded a lot and you spent some money, and your account is worth $500,000, and then if we have other parts of the financial system on-chain, you can use that account as collateral for your mortgage, for example, that you're getting on-chain. And when you start thinking about that sort of interoperability between the different financial systems, for example, I think it becomes interesting. Now, granted, there's a lot of what we call FOMO, so fear of missing out, in the market currently, and there's a lot of very, very high valuations to projects that will probably never get shipped. But I won't, I think just when free-to-play started getting more traction in the market, I think it's a completely new business model based on new technology, and I think as investors who invest for the long term, I think we need to be sort of very curious and open to the potential possibilities.
Yeah, and we're as a publisher, we're keeping an eye on it. We know it exists. We know there's a great commercial advantage to being first to market and to being last to market as well, actually, in some things. But it's not something that sits in our universe right now. But we're in the business of monetizing these beautiful things we call games, and it will be inevitably part of our business in the next 10 years.
It was a very short question, and we're answering very long, but I think that no one really has the answer. I mean, we always have people that stand in front and say, this is, the future, and this is everything. And then I think the difficult part of it is that it's part a utopian dream. It's the next step of kind of humanity, which is like with flags and stuff. And then there's the other part that is the business area, and how do we make it work? And since we are more here in the business area, so we're looking at it from that perspective, and I think that these kind of different views might clash sometime. I've had people say but you don't understand it. It's so great, and I was like, that's what I'm saying. I do not understand it. It's
as someone who sometimes, I wouldn't really call myself a professional artist, but as a hobbyist with art, I see a lot of, NFTs, it'll make it so you own your work, but then I see people tokenizing someone else's artwork, stealing it like that. And so for me, it's all just a bunch of red flags and calling it a money laundering scheme.
I think there's a ton of problems with NFTs as it currently is working. I think a lot of those problems could be solvable, and I think there's enough money being poured into it, and enough serious companies such as Ubisoft, Disney, putting the marketing dollars behind it, that they can solve a lot of these issues. It is, no one really knows at this stage.
I think it's very early, right? It's very early, and everyone is seeing it from different lenses.
That's right.
Okay, thank you. Maybe if we have the next person ask a question to a specific person, so we can. We've got about five minutes left or less. So, yeah.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. It's not a specific question towards someone, though.
Well, we'll just let one person answer then.
It's more about deadlines and how that works with publishers and investors, because I think some of the stigma around publishers is that games get released too early, right? Let's say Fallout 76, Cyberpunk, even New World, I feel, could be in development for another year. Sorry. How do you deal with that?
So from Merge point of view, we don't have slots. We're kind of lucky, I guess, in that we don't have, a lot of that things like Cyberpunk happens because you're kind of meeting financial kind of fiscal deadlines and year ends and quarter ends and that kind of thing. So they need to support the stock price and the share price of the company. So there's an expectation that a product is delivered. We're not independent anymore. We were until the past about 5 months ago, we became part of the Zordix group. But even so, right now, we don't have those pressures to hit release windows with products. So that means that we can, so as long as we know there's issues with delivering, you know, kind of a milestone, we can talk around it. And there's always a negotiation you can have. Just, I'd say just open that up and have that conversation earlier rather than later.
Okay, thank you. Next question.
Hello, I'm Sebastian Brolle from Bad Games, and I do games on my free time besides my job, and I'm mostly a solo developer. I'm wondering, is there anything an investor or a publisher could do for someone in my situation, a solo developer working on free time? And I feel like I'm kind of maybe too small to use a publisher, but I'm not sure.
I don't really think there's something that is too small. Let them decide that, not you. I mean, I think that the important thing, and I love hobbyist game developers. I think that's, I've said that yesterday as well. I think there's a stigma over it that, you know, why don't you do it professional? But I think it's amazing that people just do it for hobby, because then you have all the possibilities to either release your game for free or for paid, and you know, and you keep it all. And I think it's the most important thing is to create a game, your very first game, and take that to market yourself. So Steam, for example, is the easiest way to do that, because there's a lot of things you need to learn to go through that process just by going through like the Steam application and setting all of that up and doing that yourself first. And then with quite some easy tutorials and stuff, I would say, like to do some micro marketing on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, those kind of things, where you can just put in, 300, Norwegian krona to see what happens, and just put it on HIO and other stuff. And I think that it's a learning experience from, then you've done it once, and maybe it was not, the raving success. And I think from that point, then you can realize, or then you can feel, do I want to do that again? Or is there anyone else that could help me? Is that a freelancer that might know more about marketing, like Steven, for example? Or do we think that the game is good enough for you to go to one of the smaller publishers to see, and let them judge if they think it's good enough, or if sometimes we have a lot of publishers in Embracer. I mean, we got Koch Media and THQ Nordic and Coffee Stain, and they all are in different brackets of where the size of projects that they can take on. Koch Media has a subsidiary called Ravenscourt, which is a smaller, do more indie games, while Koch Media do the bigger ones. So it's also finding out like what publishers are out there. So you don't have to reach out maybe to the biggest ones, because you're not going to get answers for them, but try to target the ones that you find interesting, and see if at least you can have a meeting and ask the questions, so you get all the knowledge, and then you can decide together with them, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So I think we've got time for one more question, and then we'll take a little break.
Hi there. My name is Julia. You can also call me Jay. This question might be more directed to you because you mentioned wings. So I tend to be a minority in ways obvious and less so. And I'm curious to learn about what the market is like here, especially when it comes to games. I've heard of gaming being sort of small in Norway. So I'm curious what your experiences have been when it comes to minorities in this space. And furthermore, do you have any advice?
Advice for minorities in the games industry, working in the games industry. There are lots and lots of organizations, fantastic organizations that are super supportive, like POC, right? And Wings is also very supportive. There is, I think, there's a fantastic expo for people of color, game developers of color, that you should definitely attend. Virtually or in person if possible. There's a lot out there to find if you just look for it, and those are fantastic sources of knowledge, resources, and emotional support. So find the right people to surround yourself with, and I think that's the most effective thing for minorities, actually.
Okay, nice to know that there are some resources. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Well, I want to say a big thank you to all of our panelists for today. So please give me a round of applause. And if you would like to stretch your legs, take a break, and here at past, then we shall be joined by Chela Ramanan. All right? Thank you, folks.